Thank you everyone for choosing to be here at this session. Great to see you. So we're talking about the revolution in the visibility of family life. We've seen a lot on camera in these past 18 months or so. It doesn't look the same anymore because the children are not going to be Zoom bombing across every meeting now that education and childcare are back in place. But we've seen something that we can't unsee now about family life and about the juggle that's involved. So what do we do now? Where do we go from there? So as Vicky says, I'm Jennifer Liston-Smith. If you don't know Bright Horizons, we're a global organisation. We work with about 1,300 employers worldwide, about 400 in the UK, and we provide all sorts of solutions that help make work and family work. So that's everything from care solutions, workplace nurseries, backup care, things like that, through to coaching and app-based support for new parents, managers, and ongoing family life. So that's who we are and what we do. So meet on the slides here, Adelina, Nate, and Caro. You've seen them, as we said, with the meetings that we've had. We've seen work come home, or people live in work with everything going on behind us, being much more visible. And we haven't had to be the magicians that we've been expected to be in the past, where we magically disappear family life. It's been present, it's been visible. As I say, now that care is back in place, there's a tendency perhaps to imagine the whole thing will disappear, and of course the children won't be there running across camera. But the reality of the juggle and the wish for work-life balance is very prominent. We did a survey with our clients' employees in the middle of this year, and 48% said that family life was now a higher priority than before. And the rest were saying it was still the same priority. So, there's been a real change in expectation among working parents and working carers around the involvement of employers in family life. And the two worlds used to be relatively separate. There was an overlap between work and family, but it was relatively discrete. And actually, because of that space being blown open by the sheer visibility of it, just as we've had big government during the pandemic entering into our personal lives, we've had, if you like, big employer entering more into the well-being space, as evidenced very much today with the theme of this Congress, but entering into family life much more. And the competition for talent now includes what do we as employers do to recognise and support and enable family life. And not as well just to use words like support. Parents and carers are a key part of the talent population. They will often have a great understanding of the consumer groups that an organisation is trying to provide services to. So it's really key that as we move into the hybrid working world more firmly, that we don't leave behind people whose responsibilities pull against the everyday realities, and that we keep parents and carers in mind as one of the many groups to consider in our talent population. So what I'm proposing as 3 actions to take forward to support parents and carers. One is to benchmark your parental leave policies. And an easy way of doing that is we carry out a survey every 2 years, and we've literally just this month launched our current parental leave benchmark report. So my colleague Oliver, for example, here, and Naz, I don't know if Naz is here, there's Naz at the back, on stand 22, they can put you in touch with the parental leave benchmark. I'm going to say a little bit about it, but if you want to get hold, it has real granular detail on what's what, who's doing what. It's anonymous, not by name, but sectors and size of organisations, what are the norms. Hybrid working, making it work for everybody, thinking about parents and carers in the mix, and also thinking about the wider ongoing life stages of family life. So parental leave, but much more beyond that, ongoing parents and adult carers. But just touching briefly on that parental leave benchmark, what we've seen year on year, taking the last couple of runs of the parental leave benchmark, 2017, 2019, and this year, we've seen a steady increase. Now 79% of employers, so nearly 4 in 5, are enhancing maternity, adoption and surrogacy leave in some way. Little bit lower on both paternity and partner leave and shared parental leave. So paternity is enhanced by about 2/3 of employers now versus about 44% back in 2017. And shared parental leave is sort of on the rise. It's now only supported or enhanced by about 48% of employers, but that's versus 25% in 2015. So there's a rise in enhancing all forms of leave over this time. And interestingly, when we come down to the granular detail of how much is good or excellent in terms of fully paid parental leave, 26 weeks is increasingly common. That was the most frequently cited package, 26 weeks of full pay, particularly in sectors of knowledge workers and high talent like law firms, banks, tech sector increasingly, media, energy to a large extent also. So in many sectors, it's now almost a hygiene factor to be providing quite a substantial enhanced pay package. Other sectors, 16, 18 weeks is still good. And in some sectors, like, for example, travel, hospitality, leisure, which traditionally have had less enhanced package or less long enhanced packages, then even enhancing 6 weeks to full pay is good rather than the 90% of statutory, or 12 weeks, and maybe it's 6 weeks full pay and then 6 weeks half pay. So these are some of the norms that are emerging, but it's increasing over time. Really important message, though, it's not only about pay. We can sometimes fall into the trap of putting all of our available budget into extra weeks of paid leave, which is great for family life, but actually for gender pay gap, for careers, we need to be buffering the transition as well. So thinking about pre-leave, how to equip managers to have great conversations, how to create networks for parents within the organisation, either also through specialist external coaching or internal mentors, how to transmit insider tips on how to manage the transition well, how to help people leave in a way that shows they intend to come back and pick up their work and continue their careers. And when people come back, not to fall into the trap as managers of trying to be kind in a way that sidelines people from their career. Sometimes people get told, oh, well, don't worry about that project with the US. It's got late meetings. You won't want to do that. Well, maybe that is the very thing that person wants to do for their next career move. So having a dialogue, asking questions rather than making assumptions. So that's equally as important. Coming out in the research is that employers are now huge increases in things like coaching, app-based support for managers around the parental transition and childcare. So these are climbing in importance alongside making sure that there are days, weeks of paid leave for people to be with family as well. I had expected this year's benchmark to show a bigger climb in paternity and partner pay because we hear of some great examples out there of, gender inclusive equal pay packages, but they are still relatively few. And the vast majority of employers who are enhancing paternity or partner pay are enhancing 2 weeks. Now, I know the statutory pay plays into that, so it's hard for employers sometimes to go beyond that. But actually, from, a gender pay gap point of view, if we don't level the playing field, then we entrench the idea that there's one primary carer and a secondary carer. And actually, if we look around, especially among the rising generations, whatever the makeup of a couple, there's much more expectation that parenting is a shared endeavour. So sometimes, sort of raising our sights a little bit and remembering that now 21% of employers, so over a fifth of employers, are providing more than 2 weeks of paternity and partner pay is quite a key point, there. So that was the first point, benchmarking parental leave, and the benchmark report is there. So have a look at how you're doing, make the case internally, and make the case not only based on support, but based also on talent retention. So we know in organisations that have a very full programme around parental leave, there will be a 12 to 14% point increase in the maternity and other parental leave return rates. So you're getting more people back and you're reducing the costs of losing people along the way. When it comes to hybrid working, we've talked a lot about this during the day, but looking at the groups that don't engage in coming into office spaces to collaborate is really important. making those accessible, providing childcare, for example. On-site childcare really helps to make a collaborative space really attractive. But also when people are choosing to remain remote more of the time because that suits with work-life balance, then making sure that meetings are democratic, that they're well chaired so that all voices are heard. And also remembering that we've come a long way in using technology in the last 18 months. We still have some way to go in learning how to switch it off. So, those rights to disconnect, those timeouts, and understanding that the flow of somebody's day may be set around caring responsibilities, around parenting. And, as long as that person is delivering their deliverables, having that ability to self-manage is really important. We've seen it on camera. It's now a little bit more hidden, but it's still there in people's lives. So let's keep making sure that we know it's there, even though we're not seeing them Zoom bombing. Talking of which, this is Caro. So we've got, Adelina is the new maternity returner that we saw earlier. We've got Nate, who's a male project manager in the pictures that you saw earlier. This is Caro. She's got children in school age. These are really interesting times for the way that many employers are stepping up in terms of quite imaginative support around family life, beyond the obvious. So some of the trends that we've actually seen ourselves among the employers that we work with is backup care, which, as you'll probably know, traditionally has been a way of having people be present at work when their care arrangements fall down and they couldn't otherwise work. So, getting a nanny on the doorstep within half an hour, or getting a nursery place on a day that it wouldn't normally be available to that family, picking up the slack in the system. Well, that's great, and that's absolutely still how that's used by many organisations. But a lot of employers are going beyond that and saying, well, actually, in a hybrid working world, it's about flexible care. So some of the time you'll need one solution, which may be a workplace nursery, or it may be a nursery near home, and other days you might need something else because you're on the move. So some employers have started saying, well, we'll increase the number of backup care days, so you're having sessions per dependent, so you're not, to put it crassly, you're not playing off granny against the baby in terms of adult care and versus child care, but also saying where there used to be a 30-day booking window, extending that to a 90-day booking window so people can plan ahead and use school holiday cover and things like that. So again, it's those circles coming together. It's employers saying, how do we respond to the challenges that people face? How do we remove the roadblocks rather than simply how do we put care in place on a day when it falls down? And even more interesting as a development, the second point there, we've got various organisations, particularly in banking, to some extent tech, energy sectors, taking their backup care allowances and converting them into virtual tutoring. Well, that's radically different because that's less about just enabling the person to be present to work. And it's actually saying, we know that as parents, you have a concern about educational catch-up. How can we as employers step into that space and respond and make provision? So that's pretty interesting. Nursery places. Many employers now are looking at, if people are working across two different venues, they may be working in an office some of the time, and in their home office some of the time, investing in places in community nurseries instead of having a workplace nursery. You can get the same tax and NI savings, but actually give people the flexibility to have their childcare near home. So there's all sorts of real developments there. One of our US clients that is a small pharma company, but the CEO said when they put a childcare provision on site, a lot of people came forward who don't have children and said, this just shows us you recognise people's lives, which was really interesting because sometimes we think there's a resentment of the resources that are given to parents, but often people are looking forward at their future and saying, well, what message is my employer giving me? And as mentioned, it doesn't stop with childcare. You may well know Carers UK surveyed last autumn 6,000 carers, and 78% of them said their responsibilities had increased during COVID. 74% were exhausted. So there is a real expectation now, again, that because employers and our worlds have moved closer together, that we make provision. That can be everything from carers' passports to carers networks within the organisation, to, not to forget, the government consultation that's out right now. It opened on the 23rd of September, runs to the 1st of December. It's a consultation about flexible working, making flexible working a day one right instead of waiting the 26 weeks. But also in that consultation is the piece around 1 week's unpaid leave for carers. So it's quite important to engage with that and have a think about how you will either implement that as a minimum or possibly go beyond it. So we've got new parents. They've had a time of isolation. They're coming back now, concerned about visibility in the hybrid world. We've got dads and partners wanting to co-parent and to parent equally. We've got people with school-aged children wanting to understand what their employer is going to do to accommodate their lives so that they are understood as a key part of the talent population. And we've got people who are adult carers, often doing both of those at once. We can't unsee it. Now you see me. Here I am, we're sort of saying, because we've been on camera. And the children have gone back to school or care, but life goes on. And what are we as employers going to do about it? There are all sorts of things that we can do. And it's sort of down to us, really, how we respond to what we've seen. So thank you very much. I think there might be time for a question, Vicky.
Yeah, I think we've got time for a couple. I've got one here. Are you seeing any research that suggests working parents are looking for different working patterns?
Yes, very much so. So every year we carry out a piece of research called the Modern Families Index, which is a random sample of 1,000 working parents across the UK. And in that survey, so that was the beginning of the year, about 3/4 wanted some kind of hybrid working. And these were all parents in the survey. And then we surveyed our clients' employees in the middle of the year. And there was a really small group who wanted to be fully office-based and a really small group who wanted to be fully home-based. But the vast majority, again, more than 3/4, wanted a blend. Because sometimes people think, oh, well, parents will stay home because actually it can be easier to arrange work-life balance from home and factor in the school pickup. But sometimes people want a place to go. Psychologically, we differ. Some of us are what you could call integrators. We like everything to happen at once, work and home life throughout the day. Some of us are separators. We like to close the door on work and go away. So work is over there, family's over here. And for people who are that type of personality, whether they're working parents or not, they will probably still value the office. So very much we've seen a wish for a blend, certainly.
And I think we've got time for just one quick 1 minute, if you can just sort of talk about how would a global organisation implement processes to support care requirements?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because globally, again, it's one of those things that's absolutely been a revolution, hasn't it, in terms of the similar needs around the world and the fact that people could work remotely in countries where it was never considered even a desirable thing from a family point of view, countries like India or Brazil, where it just wasn't the norm to work from home. There's been a real revolution in that regard. And I know, for example, Snapdeal, I think it was, I heard in the last month, they're a tech business based in India. They have now decided that mothers will have 6 months working from home in addition to 6 months maternity leave. So that's a huge offering. And by the way, they've also instituted a day-a-month period leave for women. So, there's a huge kind of revolution globally in things that just weren't necessarily talked about or expected before. So I think we can be bold. I mean, our Parental Leave Toolkit, for example, which is an app-based solution that handholds the individual and their line manager through the parent transition and the return to work, that's run on a global scale. So that's implemented and the core resources are in there. But then it's tailored for the region. So in the US, people will be returning to work more likely to be breastfeeding because of a shorter period of leave. So there'll be resources about that, which wouldn't necessarily be so relevant elsewhere. So I would say be bold and make the provisions globally, because there's a huge appetite everywhere, but also tailor it for local.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Vicky.
Lots to think about.